Part 32. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 313. Why did Corlin ask Vera to return to the Phoenix Palace? Because of his guilty conscience. The proposal he proposed just now will indeed greatly weaken the influence of the ruling. But at the same time, it also greatly damages the interests of the Five Places family. Think about it. If the veterans of the Paladin family failed to be elected as a ruling class after the reform was implemented, how embarrassing would it be? This will cause great damage to the prestige of the Paladin family, and the interests of the family in the Senate cannot be guaranteed. Therefore, Khalil is worried that this proposal will cause Villa's opposition. After all, Vera is about to become the Duke of the North, and it will inevitably stand on the standpoint of the Sanhilder family to consider the problem. Of course, Colin is sure to persuade Vera, because as far as the current situation is concerned, the Saiba's administrative officer is for the Saint Hilda family, or it is more accurate for Vera and Colin. It is an obstacle rather than a help. It's just a matter of less, and Colin doesn't want to offend several other Paladin families. Master Prime Minister, this proposal is a gift I gave you. The only requirement is to hope that when you bring it to the Imperial meeting, don't mention my name. Oh, are you sure? Baron Heidegger's face was even more interesting. I already have 90% of my grasp to promote this proposal to be passed. This is a great opportunity to change the political situation of the Empire and even change history. Angle Viscount, are you willing to give me such a famous opportunity? Colin said indifferently, just name, I don't care as long as the imperial political situation can improve, then I am satisfied. Baron Heidegger smiled thoughtfully and seemed to see Colin's careful thought, but he didn't care. This reform proposal is an excellent opportunity to weaken the influence of the Senate. Even if he does not mention the personal grievances between him and the Senate, from the political position of the Prime Minister of the Empire, Baron Heidegger hopes to have fewer constraints on the Senate. As for offending the Paladin family, Baron Heidegger doesn't care. His power and status are those of the Emperor. The Four Dukes' views of him is not important. Moreover, Buchin Heidegger is convinced that His Majesty will definitely support this reform proposal. After all, the Senate was originally established to limit imperial power. The Emperor may not completely abolish it. Viscount, your Gao Windliang festival admires me. In this case, I am not polite. I will send this reform proposal as soon as possible to discuss the Qianqian meeting. Presumably, Her Majesty will definitely be very interested in this. However, in this way, I have to occupy your wisdom as myself, and I am a little uneasy. If you have any need, you can take this opportunity to propose, and I will try my best to help. Colin's eyes brightened, and he immediately said, Master Prime Minister, you must also know that the North has just experienced two turmoils, people's livelihoods withered, and famine. If the central government can support some food, then I will be grateful. Baron Heidegger heard the words and frowned suddenly. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head and sighed, Viscount, this requirement, I am afraid it will be a bit difficult. It's not that I don't want to help you. There are indeed some grains in the state treasury of the Empire. As soon as Colin moved, he asked, is it ready to give to the West? Yes. Baron Heidegger nodded, saw the colorful look of the Colin, and then explained, Viscount, forgive me, West China needs this batch of food. Without this food support, I am afraid there will be big problems. Although there is also a grain crisis in the North, after all, the rebellion has been flat, and I also know that you seem to be prepared. Although the grain of the semi-elf kingdom cannot fully meet the needs of the northern border, it can also temporarily relieve the urgent need. Khalil is silent. He knew that the Emperor chose to support the West instead of the North. Perhaps it was a factor in fighting the orcs in the West, but the most important thing was because of the Duke of St. Grian. His existence makes the West more valuable. Perhaps in the eyes of the Emperor, it was already to the greatest extent to send Prince Harrison to Colin as a student. Well, I can understand your embarrassment, Colin laughed. However, you also know that the money required to buy food from the semi-elf is very difficult. Can the central government avoid some taxes in the north? Baron Heidegger hesitated. I can mention it at the Qian meeting, but can I succeed or obtain how much reduction? Then it depends on the meaning of His Majesty. It's time to do it. Colin couldn't force it anymore and could only express gratitude. Baron Heidegger thought for a while and suddenly suggested, Viscount, if you want to get more taxes and deductions, I have a way. Please say. Baron Heidegger lowered his voice and said, you can enter the East. As soon as Colin moved, he immediately understood the meaning of Baron Heidegger. In fact, this is the real reason why Emperor Reinhard won the northern border. The east-east fall of the church has long been a thorn in the eyes of Emperor Reinhard. If Colin can lead the army through the Nushui River and even capture Belu City, how much support will the north receive? The emperor will not hesitate to agree with consent without hesitation. Essence. But unfortunately, Khalil was unwilling to be a knife in the hands of the emperor. What's more, the current situation in the north will not be able to withstand another war at all. If you forcibly fight against the east, I am afraid that the tragedy of the world will really appear in the north. I will consider, Colin said lightly. Baron Heidegger seemed to see the perfunctory of Colin and laughed. Actually, you don't have to really set off a war as long as you make a trend of entering the east. I can help the north at the emperor's meeting to help the north border in the north border. Kalinma was holding his chin, and the name of a city suddenly appeared in his mind, Tanchinj. Perhaps, when there is no defense in the east, he suddenly sends troops to occupy the city. There is no city defense army in Tanchinj. If it is unexpected, it can be captured without dispatching the army. At the same time, the city's geographical location is destined to be extremely sensitive, and it is easy to cause a situation of confrontation between the two areas. Colin can also use this to express loyalty to the royal family by way of pull funding. Okay, I will consider it. Colin said the same thing, but his look was much more cautious. Baron Heidegger also saw that Colin was not perfunctory this time, so he laughed and stopped saying more. Then the two chatted for a while, and Colin got up. Baron Heidegger sent Colin to the door and suddenly smiled and said, Vacus, you did help me a lot this time. As a personal thanks, I also want to give you a gift. Colin looked moved and said with a smile, I don't know what gift. Baron Heidegger said mysteriously, when you return to the north, if you have time, you may wish to go around a little and go to Dongguan town, you may have unexpected gains. Colin frowned, but when he saw that the Prime Minister had no intention, he didn't ask much. After that, he resigned after responding. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 314. The colorful glaze flashed under the light of the holy light. The sculptures of the 7 first-generation paladins were watching everyone in the hall on both sides of the hall. The 4 walls in the hall are decorated with a mural full of religious morals, and the seats on both sides are full of emperors and nobles who come to watch the ceremony. The melodious praise poems echoed in the hall, and the solemn breath of the audience covered the audience. In the center of the hall, Vera wore a simple white lace jacket and only a naked foot. The pure white iris rings were worn on her head, and her golden hair hung from her shoulders. The holy light projected from the church dome put a layer of dreamy colors on her beautiful face. Wyra stepped on the bell's beat and slowly walked towards the holy pool in front of him. The voice of praise poems is still echoed in the hall. Today and where, I mean it. All of me is my master. This contract is established, never regret it. He is worthy of herself, all respect. Atonemental blood, washing me sin. Life, live water, give me a new life. On the shore of the holy pond, Pope Grigorui faces Vera with a kind smile, watching her step closer. When Wyra stepped into the pool, the Pope spoke, and the magnificent voice echoed in the hall. Lost lambs, suffering sinner, Vera Sanhilda, you are willing to leave the prejudice and virtuality of the past, serve the Lord of Guanghui, never regret it, and endlessly. Wyra raised his head, staring at the Pope, who seemed to penetrate people's hearts, and said firmly, I am willing. The Pope nodded, signaled Vera to continue, and at the same time said, immerse in this pool, you will separate from dirty. In this pool, your sin will be washed. Immersed in this pool, you will reclean. When Vera was immersed in the holy water, the Pope stretched out his right hand, placed it on the surface of the pool, and said clearly, may my master's glory shine on your future path. Okm. From the sky, the holy light suddenly became dazzling, and a magnificent breath enveloped everyone. Colin can even feel the look down at the top of his head, like Huang Tianwei, making mortals dare not look directly. In this eye, everyone in the church was like ants, sincere and fearful, and trembling. I don't know how long, but the eyes were finally hidden, and the holy light full of the entire church hall gradually dissipated. Colin couldn't hide his shock and asked Baron Heidegger by his side, will the baptism hosted by the Pope's crown attract the gaze of the Lord of Glory? No, a sneer at the corner of Barry's Heidegger's mouth. When the Pope needs, and are you sure that the glory of the glory is? Khalil was slightly frozen and puzzled, if it is not the eyes of the gods, what would it be? Baron Heidegger suddenly closed his mouth and said nothing. Colin had to turn his eyes back to the center of the hall. At this time, Vera was straight from Shengshui Station, and her wet clothes outlined her exquisite curve. Fortunately, the rude eyes are around. A female priest stepped forward and put a white robe on Vera. Wyra then walked out of the holy pool and thanked Pope Grigory. Pope Grigory said with a smile, Miss Villa, you are the person who has been watched by my owner, and it will be blessed in the future. Vera seemed to be a little dazed and quickly said, praise my master, this glory, I have been ashamed. No, my lord will not see the wrong person, the Pope Gary said deeply, Miss Villa, you will find your own mission. After saying this, Pope Gregers turned away. The baptism ceremony has ended. Colin stepped forward, helping Wyra's wet hair, and asked, is it cold? Vera shook his head and asked in a confused tone, Clorin, I seem to hear someone saying a word in my ear just now. Oh, what? Colin was surprised and asked quickly. I can't remember it. Vera's pretty face was full of confusion, and the water droplets rolled down from time to time, making her look like a hibiscus with water, which was beautiful. Then don't have to think about it. Colin smiled and was about to take Vera to leave when he saw Emperor Leonhardt and Queen Madila slowly coming. Your Majesty, His Royal Highness, the two greeted them quickly. Emperor Reinhardt waved his hand and signaled that the two would not have to be more courteous, and then said with a smile to Vera, how, do you feel my master's power? Well, feel it. A complicated look appeared on the face of Emperor Reinhardt, but soon he put on a kind smile and nodded. Well, take a good rest today. In the early morning of the morning, I will seal you in the Phoenix Palace as the Duke of the North. Yes, Majesty. At this time, Queen Madila came forward and held Vera's hand. I'll take you to change your clothes. Thank you, Auntie. When the two walked away, Emperor Reinhardt suddenly said to Colin, listen to Baron Heidegger, saying, do you want to get food support, and there is taxation and exemption? Yes, His Majesty, the situation in the north is difficult. If the central government can help, the St. Hilda family will be grateful. The Emperor Reinhardt shook his head and said, the finances of the empire are not full, I can't promise you anything. However, I have a suggestion. Please say. East China has always been wealthy and has not encountered knife soldiers for so many years. The food accumulated in the warehouse is jealous. Therefore, you can consider buying from the East or owe some food. Colin blinked and smiled bitterly. Your Majesty, I'm afraid the East may not want to. Emperor Reinhardt patted Colin's shoulder with a smile and said, this depends on your ability. Colin looked into the cold eyes of Emperor Reinhardt and was helpless in his heart. He knew that the other party was still entering East China. As for whether the Northern Realm can still start a battle with the East, maybe Emperor Reinhardt will not care. Yes, His Majesty, I will work hard to persuade the East. The Emperor Reinhardt smiled indifferently, seemed to understand the meaning of Colin, and suddenly said, by the way, remember to bring Harrison and let him learn more with you. Colin wants to say that the sword on the battlefield is not eye-catching, and you are not afraid that your son has something wrong. Of course, Colin will definitely not be stupid enough to say. At this time, Vera also changed his clothes and came over with Madeira. Colin held Vera's hand, and the two resigned to the Emperor and the Queen together. After they left, Emperor Reinhardt asked, whispering, "How is it?" Queen Madeira nodded, his expression was a little dignified. The face of Emperor Reinhardt suddenly became a little embarrassed, and he roared, "Damn Grigoru, he is the desecration of God." Queen Madeira spoke silently. The eyes of Emperor Reinhardt seemed to have made up his mind, now cancel tomorrow's booking ceremony. You are crazy, the Senate has recognized Vera's right to inherit. So, I already have a way to deal with the elderly. That's not okay, this will seriously damage your prestige, and it will make other pavilion family members chill. Emperor Reinhardt's tone was full of anxiety and anger. What do you say? After Queen Madeira thought for a moment, he said, Colin Angle, we can control the north through him. Emperor Reinhardt smiled, do you think that Harrison and Judy worshipped him as a teacher, can he let him die for us? No, I have a way. Any solution? Queen Madeira did not answer the question of Reinhardt but said lightly, if you have trust in me, don't ask more. Emperor Reinhardt narrowed his eyes, his face was gloomy, and he seemed to be in the struggle of the battle of heaven and man. After a while, he finally smiled and said, of course I believe you, my queen. Then wait for my good news. After speaking, Queen Madeira wasted lightly, and Ting Ting walked out. This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 315. Night fell. Wyra, who had just bathed, changed his silk nightcap. His white and exquisite foot gently tapped it on the pine wooden floor. A pretty face reflected in the mirror, hazy, like a rose just nourished by the rain, gorgeous and unparalleled. There is a faint aroma in the room, fresh and timeless, lingering. Colin was lying on the sofa, admiring Vera's little wife's expression quietly, when he suddenly smiled and asked, what's going on with the golden mark on your chest? Vera crooked his head, and he was also doubtful, I don't know, it seems that it has just appeared today, maybe it is related to the baptism. Colin gradually converged with a smile and frowned, bade. Well, but I don't think there is any abnormal body. Vera didn't care. Seeing Colin's worried about herself, Villa walked over with a tiptoe, rushing lightly on the sofa, and drilled into the lover's arms. Then let me take a closer look. Colin held Vera's slender waist and reached out to solve her nightdress. Wyra laughed and didn't stop it. But at this moment, the door was suddenly knocked out. Colin had to stop his movement and ask, what is it? The maid's voice came from outside the door, Master Viscount, His Royal Highness, please give lectures to Prince Harrison and Princess Judy. Colin has been speechless for a while. What class are you talking about now? Vera kissed the cheek gently and said with a smile, go, let's wait for a long time. Colin had no choice but to get up. Okay, if I come back late, you sleep first. Vera nodded and began to help Colin change clothes. After cleaning up, Colin went out and followed the maid all the way to the main hall. As far as you go, Colin finds that the guards here are heavy. After about a minute, the maid finally stopped, reached out, and gently pushed the gorgeous golden silk wooden door, and the maid bowed to Colin. Colin nodded and walked in. In the eyes, there is a dark red table, snow-white cashmere carpet, and exquisite crystal chandeliers, but there is no one. His Royal Highness. Colin shouted tentatively, and then he heard a soft voice sounding, "Angle line, please go inside." Colin took a few steps forward, and after a corner, he found the door to the inside. With the light yarn hanging on the door, Colin walked in. Pink curtains, luxurious ivory beds, exquisite dressing tables. Claire immediately realized that it should be the Queen's bedroom. The gentle night wind blew in, and the curtain on the balcony moved with the wind, revealing a looming, slender figure. Colin said, "His Royal Highness." Queen Madila looked back, smiled at Colin Yan, and said, "Looking for you so late, I hope you don't mind." "Of course not. I don't know where Prince Harrison and Princess Judy are now, and where do you want me to teach them from?" "This is not in a hurry, I have more important things to talk to you about." "Please say." Colin suddenly had an ominous hunch, but now that he had been fooled, he couldn't turn around and run. "Don't be nervous, sit down." Colin looked around and found that there was only the bed, couch, and dressing table here. But he obviously couldn't sit in these two places, so he stood embarrassedly, pretending not to hear. Fortunately, Queen Madara did not mean too much. "When I saw this, I asked, 'What do you think of this morning?'" As soon as Colin moved, he immediately thought of the gaze that seemed to fall from the sky and the appearance of the Imperial Prime Minister at the time. "I think it's good." Colin was stupid. "It is really a glory to see the Pope's crowns in person." Queen Madila looked at Colin with a smile, as if trying to see his true thoughts. But Colin lowered his head and was unmoved by the Queen's attention. "Hey," Queen Madila sighed, and there was a trace of resentment in her voice. "It seems you still don't trust me." "Of course I trust His Royal Highness." Colin immediately interacted, but he couldn't hear much sincerity. The room was silent, and only the light sound of the night breeze was blowing through the curtain. After waiting for a long time, I didn't hear the Queen's voice, and Colin couldn't help raising his head. Then I met the quiet eyes of the other party. The evening breeze blew the thin dresses on her tightly outlined, wonderful curve. Colin immediately retracted his eyes and returned to his state of eyesight, nose, and mind. Queen Madara finally spoke again, but this time, her voice became a little dignified. "Colin, you may not realize the seriousness of the matter." "His Royal Highness, please forgive my ignorance." Colin still looked like that and seemed to keep his heart at a distance from this beautiful queen. Queen Madila could not see the anger on his face. I saw her leave the balcony and slowly walk towards Colin. He said in his mouth, "Remember that we met for the first time in the Winter City. At that time, I went to participate in Waypole, the adult ceremony." "Yes, His Royal Highness." "Colin, you didn't know what the Queen wanted to do." "I remember, that adult ceremony is really wonderful. Prince of Giant, Prince Half-Elf, and you, the three of them, seek marriage to Vera at the same time, but my brother finally chose the Elf Prince. You two almost hit." Listening to Queen Madara recall the past, Colin was still silent, but he kept guessing the real purpose of the Queen. "Oh, yes, a major event happened at that time." Empress Madara had gone to Colin, exhaling like Lan Road. "Marquis Adams was poisoned." Colin lowered his head and watched the pink toenails shining with a crystal light on the pink toenails of the Queen's fairness, and he couldn't help but narrow his eyes slightly. The Queen Madara held the chin behind Colin, forced his eyes to himself, and asked with a smile, "Do you know who the poison is?" Colin's heart finally set up a wave of waves, and the thoughts continued to appear in his mind, but he couldn't catch the most critical one. This puzzle has troubled him for a long time. At that time, his first suspicion was the Marquis of Garcia. At that time, the Duke of St. Hilda had just betrayed his brother and did not obey his promise to let Vera inherit the position of the Marquis of the East, but chose his second son Adams. Colin's first reaction may also have been the first reaction of most people at the time. Adams's death was revenge on his brother, Garcia. But later, Colin felt that, with the personality of the Marquis of Garcia, he should not be able to do this kind of poison. During Union City, when guessing a series of plans for the Duke of St. Hilda, Colin felt that the Duke of St. Hilda might stage a bitter plan and poison his second son. But then, when Colin learned that the Duke of St. Hilda was a paladin, he immediately overturned his guess. After all, the Duke of St. Hyde, who has the strength of the paladins, will not use this method to achieve his purpose. Colin had already given up, and I felt that the death of Marquis Adams would always be a suspension, but now Queen Madila has even raised the matter again. This made Colin's thoughts in his heart. Queen Madira looked at Colin, who changed her look and finally showed a satisfactory smile, but she seemed to be more than satisfied with it and said again. And the will left by the Duke of St. Hilda, you guess, why did he set Vera as the first heir? Colin opened his mouth but didn't know how to speak. The smile on Queen Madila became more brilliant, and she threw a heavy bomb again. Do you know, His Majesty wanted to veto Vera's inheritance right twice, but I was stopped. Do you know why? Colin looked at this charming face at hand, and his heart banged almost out of his chest. Thousands of thoughts finally gathered into an answer in his mind, but this answer made Colin unable to escape. Queen Madira appreciated Colin, who was entangling, and said with a smile, Clorin, no, in this world who wants to see Vera as the Duke of the North, except you, it's me. At this time, Colin calmed down. He knew that Queen Madira had a showdown. This can only show that the situation is indeed very serious, as she said. She was no longer allowing Colin to leave her with her, and on the surface, she said trust, but she turned to suspicion when she turned around. His Royal Highness, I understand. Colin no longer avoided the gaze of Queen Madira. What do you understand? A surprise flashed in the eyes of Queen Madila. I understand why I should trust you. Why? Colin gently opened the hand of Queen Madira, took half a step back, and said respectfully. Because you are Vera's biological mother. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busrud. Chapter 317. Colin has begun to guess her identity since I met Villa for the first time. And the secret that may be hidden under her identity. The Duke adopted a daughter but was sent to Jevely to learn Olympics. At that time, Colin was thinking of the reason why Duke St. Hilda did. It wasn't until the corner of the secret of Garcia that Colin understood the conflict and entanglement of Duke St. Hilda when he treated Vera. But at the same time, he couldn't help wondering. Who is Villa's biological mother? Why didn't the Marquis of Garcia marry her? Why is it taboo for her identity? Now he finally understands. This mother is incest. No wonder the Marquis of Garcia cannot marry her, and no wonder the Duke of St. Hilda will help collect Vera as a daughter. Moreover, think about the age of Queen Madira, and then think of Villa's age. Colin can't help scolding the Marquis of Garcia. Beast. To set up modern society, it is definitely signed with a certain end. He finally understood that Marquis Jaw was poisoned by whoever was poisoned. At that time, the secret commitment between the Duke of St. Hilda and the Marquis of Garcia, Queen Madira, must also have been known. Therefore, after the Duke of St. Hilda rejected the discard, the Villa's biological mother implemented revenge decisively. However, Colin couldn't help raising a doubt again. Reasonably, Duke St. Hilda should have mastered the handle of the Marquis of Garcia and Queen Madira. Once the news of the two incidents was leaked, they were completely over. Especially for Madira, her queen is definitely not guaranteed, and the angry emperor may kill her. Why did Queen Madira dare to be so arrogant, not only poisoning Marquis Adams but also forcing the Duke of St. Hilda to write a will and set Vera as the first heir to the Duke of the North? Unless the Duke of St. Hilda has a more critical handle in the hands of Queen Madira. Just as the complaint between the three brothers and sisters was supplemented by Khalil's brain, Queen Madara spoke again. Khalil, you are really clever, but I hope that your cleverness can be used in the right place. Yes, His Royal Highness. Khalil's attitude was a lot more sincere. Although he still had all kinds of doubts about the mysterious queen, at least Khalil could confirm that she should not harm Vera. In this regard, she and he are indeed natural allies. Do you know why I chose to be frank with you at this time? Queen Madara took a few steps back, lying on the ivory bedside, showing the outsourcing body curve. It should be because of the baptism ceremony during the day. Khalil no longer avoided the problem and said it seriously. I also guess Pope Gregory may have moved some hands and feet on Villa. That's right, the vision that appeared in the final stage of the baptism was not a normal process, but the magic of the Pope. What kind of magic? I don't know either. Khalil couldn't help but look up, but she saw that Queen Madara looked helpless and, not intentionally, didn't say it. There are many secrets in the church, even if the royal family can't figure it out. Empress Madara continued, there are actually two divine arts performed by Gregoria at the baptism ceremony. One is the one you feel looking down. Do you think it is the gaze of the Lord of Gel? Seeing Khalil nod, Queen Madara dismissed, how could the Lord of Glorious be cast a look for such trivial matters? This divine art is actually just a disguise. The purpose is to attract the attention of everyone and cover up the second god he really wants to exert. Khalil asked quickly, there is another divine. Yes, I don't know the name, but I know its effect. What effect? Khalil asked a little nervously. It will gradually get closer to the holy light and eventually become the church's madman. Khalil's heart was tight, and he was concerned about Villa. He first asked, His Royal Highness, if you don't know the name of this divine art, how can you know its effect? Because Vera is not the first recipient. Oh, who else had been cast this divine before? Queen Madara did not answer immediately but asked, do you know why the church and the royal family have been fighting from the beginning of the founding of the People's Republic of China to the present? Khalil wanted to say, isn't it just fighting for power? Is it more reasonable? But in the end, he said sincerely, please help me solve the confusion. Because the first generation of the Pope had used a similar means when he washed the son of the founding Emperor Ghana, Empress Madara smiled coldly and then said. At that time, His Majesty Ghana didn't care and thought it was the baptism of his son that attracted the glory of the Lord of Glory, but then, over time, Galonus was getting closer to the church and even wanted to be a hardship, or even join the Templar Cavaliers. At this time, His Majesty Ghana realized something was wrong. Later, he went to the top of the sacred mountain to ask the Pope and even moved. In the end, the Pope finally acknowledged his small movement under the threat of the legendary pavilion and personally lifted the magic marks on Galonus. Essence. After that, Galonus gradually returned to normal, and after he was crowned the second emperor of the empire, he even more restricted the power of the church, which also thoroughly triggered the battle between the church and the royal family for thousands of years. Then this divine art, except for the recipient getting close to the church, has no other side effects. Yes, however, it cannot be said that it is a side effect because it can actually strengthen the induction and affinity of the scholarly light. Do you know the Templar Knights? Most of the knights inside are civilians because few children of nobles are willing to dedicate themselves to the church and become tools driven by others. Therefore, the church will choose some well-qualified civilian children and wash them for them. However, due to the poor blood of civilians, the affinity of the holy light is extremely poor. Even if it is barely becoming a knight, the achievements are very limited. Therefore, this divine art is needed to help them strengthen the induction of the holy light and help them promote it. A kind of brainwashing method was created by the pious knights in the Knights of the Temple. Of course, the knights born with this divine ability cannot be promoted to the sanctuary. Otherwise, I believe that many nobles will join the Templar Knights without fear for the glory of the Paladin. It's good to have no other negative effect. Colin took a little relief and breathed a long breath, saying, therefore, if you want to lift the magic on Vera, you must go to the Pope Grigory. Yes, Queen Madila nodded. However, I advise you not to act lightly. Grigory is not a simple role, nor is it as good as his appearance. I see. In addition, I advise you not to tell Vera that the impact of this magic on human beings cannot be compared with her own will, so that she will only increase her anxiety and guilt when she knows. What should I do? Queen Madila looked at Colin seriously and stretched out a finger. First of all, you must control the military and political power in the north. I believe that it should not be difficult to trust you with Vera's trust with Vera. Later, she stretched out her second fingers. Secondly, you must pay attention to Vera's mental state. It is best not to let her contact the church too much. It is no matter how good it is. Of course, be careful when studying, don't let the church people see it. After all, after converting to the Lord of Guanghui, it can no longer contact the heresy of Olympic arcane. Seeing Colin nod, Queen Madara finally said, when the time is ripe, we can follow His Majesty Ghana, please Pope's crowns to relieve God in person. The so-called timing is, of course, when the royal family can completely suppress the church. Okay, Khalil nodded with a dignified face, I will do it as instructed by you. Queen Madila nodded with satisfaction and rebloomed with a smile. The light in the whole bedroom seemed to be much brighter. Collins, I have always appreciated you, and I also think you are the key figure in our church. I hope you don't let me down. I will do my best, Collins said deeply, and then said, His Royal Highness, if you have no other instructions, then I will retreat first. Wait, Queen Madara immediately stopped Colin. You forgot the most important thing. What's the matter, please say. Alliance. Khalil was slightly frozen and puzzled. Do you want an alliance ceremony? The rituals are all virtual. The key is, what is the foundation we trust? Colin seemed to understand the meaning of Queen Madara and tentatively said, do you want me to swear to you? I don't believe in vows. Colin was a bit embarrassed and tentatively said, then we write a written contract. Queen Madila still shook her head. That kind of thing is just waste paper. Colin has nothing to do now, so you have to say, do you have any good suggestions? Queen Madara stared at Colin with a deep look and said, do you trust me now? Certainly. Why? Because you are the biological mother of Vera, and I am Villa's husband. Queen Madila nodded and shook his head again. Yes, but my blood relationship with Vera cannot be changed, but you can divorce at any time. Colin narrowed his eyes and looked at Queen Madara quietly. He seemed to want to see what a soul was hidden behind this beautiful face. When Queen Madara saw Colin, he smiled lightly and said, let me tell you why you can trust me, because I have a handle in your hands. This is really right. After learning that Vera was the biological daughter of Empress Madara and even knew the real murderer of the deaths of Merinos, Colin did master the hand of Queen Madila. Therefore, even without the relationship with Vera, Colin can ensure that Empress Madara does not do things that harm his interests. Otherwise, as long as Colin is public to the public, the end of Empress Madara will inevitably be extremely miserable. But this is just a unilateral trust. Colin finally understood the meaning of Queen Madila and blurted out, do you want my handle too? That's right, Queen Madila nodded. This alliance is the real jurisdiction. Colin heard that he had to admire the wonderful logic of the Queen. For the first time, he saw such an alliance. But if you think about it carefully, it really makes sense for his mother. If both sides have each other's handles, they are indeed more binding than vows, alliances, and other things. Sorry, His Royal Highness, I am afraid that there is no handle for you, Colin said innocently, as if it were a 20-year-old boy who had never done evil. Queen Madara stretched out a crystal jade foot, slowly climbing along the thigh of Colin, and at the same time, he said with an extremely ambiguous tone. It's okay, now we can make a handle. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 318. Chapter 315. Colin's body was stiff immediately. For a while, all kinds of strange thoughts came out of his mind. Later, he stepped back a few steps back, opened the distance from this dangerous woman, and smiled bitterly, "His Royal Highness, please do not tease me." Queen Madila's face was cold, and she said, "Do you think I am kidding you?" Khalil's mind rushed, and he kept thinking about what else she could give to Queen Madara to gain her trust. But thinking about it, I found that I seemed to have the biggest secret, the blood race. Of course, Colin did not want to leak this to Queen Madila. This woman feels mysterious and dangerous. If she can, Colin just wants to hide as much as possible. I don't know if I saw through the thoughts of Colin's heart. The corner of the mouth of Queen Madara was raised gently, and the warning was, "If you can't satisfy me today, you will never get out of this room." Colin must be believed. He didn't know how the level of Madila's force was, but he knew that as long as the other party shouted, he would immediately come in a group of guardians like a tiger. Colin does not feel that, with his current strength, he can be free to guard the most strict places in the glorious empire. "How is it, do you think about it?" Queen Madila urged. "You have to get a little bit, but my patience is very limited. And, don't think you are my only choice. Don't forget that Garcia has won my trust even more. If he were not old and disabled, it is estimated that his mind would be rubbed by that defeat and captive career. He was the best guardian for Villa." Colin narrowed his eyes and suddenly doubted that he was not as good as the Marquis of Garcia. He strongly believes X's innocent younger sister, or this gloomy Madeira, seduced his younger brother with his body. Thinking of this, Colin's look at Queen Madila became more and more dangerous. Queen Madila seemed to misunderstand this look, giggled, and the loose long skirt slipped down under such actions, revealing the deep white gully. She hooked her fingers towards Colin, and she was seduced with her eyes. "Come on, Clorin." Colin finally made up his mind and rushed up, opened his mouth, and bit his mouth to bite Queen Madila's neck. However, in the next second, he found that his throat was held up by Queen Madila's elbow. "Giggle, don't worry," Queen Madara made in Colin's ear, softly. "Also, what's a strange action, could it be between you and Villa? You like to use bitter people to bite people." The gentle breath stroked in the airs, and the charming fragrance lingered in the nose, but Colin was stiff. Because he was shocked that the seemingly weak queen turned out to be a high-level knight. Colin did not make full efforts, but he estimated that Queen Madara was at least 4th order and may even be a 5th order knight. Of course, if Colin shows his real state, he can forcibly subdue Madara, but he is not sure that he would not be able to alarm outside guards. "Ahem, I'm so excited," Colin said awkwardly, and at the same time, he controlled the teeth in his mouth to shrink back. "Don't worry, it's more emotional when you take it slowly." Queen Madara held Colin's waist and pasted her whole body. However, Colin hid an electric shock. "Don't run." Queen Madila was wrapped up like a weak and boneless beauty snake. Colin hurriedly begged, "His Royal Highness, I calm down and think about it. I still feel that this is not appropriate, otherwise, I'll give you a handle." "You, what else do you have?" Queen Madara asked with a smile. As soon as Colin gritted his teeth, he confessed, "The Queen of Half-Elf is my lover, and her child is also my child." "I have guessed this long ago." Queen Madara shook his head. "And this is not a fatal handle, at most to cause some riots in the semi-elf kingdom, and the child may lose the right to legitimate inheritance. Even if it really loses control of the semi-elven kingdom, what does it mean for you?" "What I want is a truly fatal handle." Khalil's heart electric turned sharply and said, "Do you know the reform plan proposal proposed by the Prime Minister's adult?" "Well, I heard. Actually, I put it out." Queen Madara glanced at Colin in surprise and laughed. "I didn't expect You are doing this against political struggles. Colin said with a deep voice, His Royal Highness, how is this handled? If people know that this reform proposal comes from me, the 5 paladin families will hate me, and even Villa will have a gap in me. Queen Madila still shook his head. Not necessarily this proposal will hate you to the bone, but some people will also favor you even more. For example, His Majesty, if he knows this, maybe he will want to promotion when you enter the government office. Seeing silence of Colin's, Queen Madila's face was getting closer and closer, and the charming voice said, Don't resist anymore, Colin, I know you actually want to. I killed Charles. Khalil was horizontal, throwing out a heavy material again. Queen Madara was stunned and asked, with some unbelievable, Charles St. Hilda. Yes, when the Colin Queen finally changed his face, he sighed quietly. But how do I hear that Charles died in the hands of the Cavaliers of the Golden Lion Legion, the head of the army? How can the Nelson Cavaliers dare to kill Charles? Colin sneered and began to make a mess. At that time, I killed Charles in order to obtain control of the Golden Lion Legion and marry the Nelson Cavaliers. Queen Madara stared into Colin's eyes and seemed to be looking at whether he was lying. How do you prove that you don't lie? Faced with the Queen's question, Colin smiled lightly and asked, His Royal Highness, how can you prove that you are Vera's biological mother? The Queen laughed and said, You can go to the Marquis of Garcia for verification. Colin also responded immediately, When I killed Charles, the campaigning Cavaliers were also present. You can also verify him. The Queen seemed to understand something and suddenly said, No wonder you appointed campaigning Cavaliers as the new leader of the Golden Lion Legion. Yes, Colin pretended to be seen by you. Anyway, the Queen couldn't go to Camp Benin to verify in a short time, so Colin was not worried that his lies were demolished. As for the future, Khalil now just wants to have the same level in front of him and wait for him to completely control the northern border in the future, even if the Queen finds out what he is lying about. His Royal Highness, how is this handled? If people know that Charles was killed, then I would be famous in the north, and Vera would break with me. I even sent the St. Hilda family knights to chase me. Queen Madara thought for a moment and seemed to finally let go, but there were infinite grievances on his face. How, you tell so many secrets, but you are unwilling to follow me? Could it be that I have been old and declined, and I can't enter your eyes? Of course not, His Royal Highness, you are the most beautiful woman I have seen in this life. Colin first gave a rainbow fart decisively and then said with a righteous face, But I have my own bottom line. Queen Madara looked at Colin for a long time and seemed to be touched, and a sorrow flashed in his eyes, sighing, The bottom line, it's good, I hope you remember your insistence today. After speaking, she let go of Colin in a hurry, took a few steps back, looked up, and restored the image of the dignified and majestic empire again. Colin was completely relaxed. At this time, he found that his back was completely wet with cold sweat. Remember this fingerprint, Empress Madeira said. At the same time, her hands raised their hands to her chest, her palms were inward, and her fingers were entangled, forming lotus-like handprints. In the future, you can see this handprint. Trust. Yes, Colin quickly wrote it down and then retired. This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 319. Chapter 316. In the early morning of the next day, the sun was bright and soft, and it was very comfortable to shine on the person. Today, Her Majesty Reinhardt St. Lorenzo will be registered in the Phoenix Palace as the Duke of the North in the Phoenix Palace. In addition, the Emperor will also award the authority of the Guardian of Colin Angle to the northern border to recognize his outstanding contributions and his great contribution to the rebellion of the northern border against the Troll. Of course, Colin himself knew very well that the reason he could gain the authority of the Northern Guardian was that he won the trust of Queen Madila last night. In this way, Colin has become the existence of more than 10,000 people under one person in the north. It can justify the lords in the north without the name of Villa. This is also a necessary means of worrying about Vera's influence on Varamia. At 9 a.m., Colin and Vera rode a horse and began to patrol the Royal Dragon City under the guardianship of the Honor Knights. Of course, it is said to be inspecting the whole city, but it is actually a circle around the Phoenix Palace. The soldiers of the City Defense Army have already blocked the surrounding intersections, and they are prohibited from passing by cars, horses, and pedestrians. The children of the aristocratic capitals and the family members of the emperor can only gather on both sides of the road, looking at the upcoming Duke of the North border with curious eyes. Vera wears a gorgeous Duke dress today, her hair is the most popular lady's style, and a string of crystal and round pearl necklace hangs on her neck. The noble temperament immediately attracted the attention of many nobles and men. Perhaps these guys are secretly cursing Colin in their hearts. Such a beautiful woman who integrates beauty and power for a lifetime, how can they be ascended by the son of this country's baron? This is not Colin's careful eye, and he deliberately arranged the children of the emperor's nobles. The eyes of those who voted from both sides of the street were almost unscrupulous. After patrolling the city, Colin and Villa came to Phoenix Palace. 4 knights, all wearing exquisite armor and holding spears in ceremonies, stepped forward, guarding the 2 on the golden cashmere carpet. Entering the main hall, there are 6 sword-holding angel statues on both sides. They are carved with white glazed rocks. The wings converge, their eyebrows low, facing the entrance of the main hall, half kneeling on the base, as if they are walking in Colin and Vera, who come in, slotting to pay attention. Crossing the statue of angels, the sides of the hall were full of adults who were full of glorious empires. Everyone slowly turned their heads and paid attention to the walking in the team. In the hall, there are only the powerful footsteps of the ceremonial knights and the Colin couples, and the atmosphere is dignified and solemn. To walk halfway, Colin stopped and let Vera move forward alone, walking towards Reinhardt. Through the crystal sunroof at the top, the sunlight came to form a pure light, and it just enveloped Vera and Reinhardt in the center of the hall. Vera's body was plated with a faint layer of golden halo by the sun. I saw that she pulled out the sword around her waist, kneeled on the steps, lowered her head, and held the sword in her hand. The Emperor Reinhardt took Vera's sword and the blade set on her shoulder and said clearly, "I, Emperor Glory Empire, Reinhardt St. Lorenzo, in the name of the Lord of glorious and sacred ancestors, Abaked Varara St. Hilda, am the Duke of the Glory Empire. I hope you use loyalty, courage, and wisdom, go to protect this glory." Immediately, Villa Qingliang sounded a slightly immature voice in the hall. "I, Vera San Hilder, swear by the hero of the ancestors of the Golden Lion family, dedicated loyalty to the Lord of Glorious, and to the great St. Lorenzo. Your will is the direction of my progress, and your order is my belief." Emperor Reinhardt nodded, returned the sword to Vera, and took out the Duke's seal from the tray held by the sword knight next to him to give Vera. At this point, Vera's booking ceremony was over. The ownership of the Duke of the North was finally settled. Colin looked at the scene in front of him and was finally relieved. Of course, Villa becoming the Duke does not mean that everything is good. Colin knows that there is a more severe test waiting for her. As Vera stepped back, Colin strode forward and came into the presence of Emperor Reinhardt, kneeling on one knee. Emperor Reinhardt looked at the young knight who was kneeling in front of himself deeply, and an extremely complicated look flashed in his eyes. Until the Queen miles behind him coughed a few times, he returned to God and said again, "I, Emperor Glory Empire, Reinhardt St. Lorenzo, representing all the lords and nobles of the empire in this sacred place, the authority of the guardian of the north border of Colin Angolan was awarded." Immediately, Emperor Reinhardt took out the golden dagger symbolizing the guardian's identity and handed it to Colin. Colin took his hands and said, "Big channels. I, Colin Angle, in this sacred place, under the glance of the Glory Master, shoulder the responsibility of guarding the north and using this as glory from today until the day of my life ends. Later, Colin got up and prepared to retreat, but was called by Emperor Reinhardt. Angle Viscount, the sword on your waist is Blade of Judgment. Colin was stunned, quickly stopped, and leaned down slightly. Yes, His Majesty. Can I see? Certainly. Colin slowly pulled out the saber and handed it to Emperor Reinhardt. Emperor Reinhardt held the sword in one hand, and the other hand slowly stroked the dark sword. The place of the flames was made of golden light. 3 emperors have died under this sword. Yes, Your Majesty. Indeed, 300 years ago, the Black Emperor was beheaded by the Duke of St. Meadow Emperor Murdal, who was killed by the Duke of St. Hilder 5 years ago, and the death of this year. Madad too is in the hands of Colin. The Emperor Reinhardt stared at the knight's sword for a long while and then suddenly asked, You know, what did the monarch say before killing the Black Emperor 300 years ago? Colin shook his head and couldn't figure out what Emperor Reinhardt wanted to do. The aristocrats who came to watch the ceremony were also confused, and only the Empress Madara flickered and seemed to be thinking about something. The Emperor Reinhardt suddenly shot, and the sword scratched a golden light in the air, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived in the throat of Colin. The sound of the hall was shocked, and everyone was frightened by the Emperor's move. Vera was about to rush over but was pulled over by Queen Madila. Colin was motionless, and even his eyes didn't blink, as if the murder of the 3 emperors was not stained with the blood of the 3 emperors in front of him but a wooden stick without threatening. When Emperor Reinhardt saw the free reaction of Colin, a little appreciation flashed in his eyes, saying, he said, representing my owner, give you a deserved trial. Colin blinks and waits for the Emperor. Sure enough, Emperor Reinhardt asked again, do you know how the Black Emperor responded? Colin shook his head again. Please forgive my ignorance. Of course, Emperor Reinhardt would not blame Colin. In fact, this history has always been taboo, and no nobles present at the scene knew what happened at the time. I only know that the judge killed the Black Emperor. As for the specific process and detailed causes, they have been deliberately hidden. Today, Emperor Reinhardt knew why but wanted to reveal this dusty history. The Black Emperor said, the corner of the Emperor Reinhardt's mouth slightly raised, you can't represent my master, you only represent yourself. Colin narrowed his eyes and thought about what the Emperor wanted to express. After Emperor Reinhardt finished the sentence, he returned the blade of the trial to Colin and then left without saying a word. Vera trotted over, holding Colin's arm, and asked, Colin, are you okay? Of course it's okay. Colin patted Villa's arm gently and walked out. The nobles who watched the ceremony came forward and congratulated these 2 leaders in the north. After dealing with these people, Colin led Vera to walk out of the hall but she saw a familiar figure in front of the steps. The corner of Colin had an inexplicable smile and greeting. Arion, Sybazin. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Ludo Busroot. Chapter 320. Chapter 317. Back to the residence all the way. Colin asked Vera to wash his clothes first, and invited the Sybazin herself to sit in the living room. Governor, what's the matter with you? At this time, Sebas's attitude was a 180-degree turn. There was no pride at the time when they met, but it seemed to be a nodding Colin. Of course, Colin understood that the other party should hear the wind and know the reform plan of the Empire Prime Minister's election of the Senate's correspondence election, and then panicked. He couldn't panic. With the experience of Sybas's many years, he knows that this reform proposal will definitely be passed. The gaming rules of the Senate will also be completely rewritten. Originally, as the transcendent status of the administrative official, Sabas didn't even deliberately please the Duke of the North. After all, the ruling is a lifelong system, and even if Vera does not like Sybas, he cannot replace him. As for the candidate for the next ruling, Cybus is not in a hurry. His body is still very healthy. It is not a problem to live for 20 or 30 years. At that time, who knows what the situation in the north has become. Even if Vera is still the Duke of the North, Cybus can make some compromise and exchange in 1 or 2 years before dying, so that the heir can become a candidate for the correspondent recommended by the St. Hilda family. But it's different now. The ruling officer has been selected for 3 years, and every elder is qualified to run. In order to keep his status, Cybus must immediately compromise. Moreover, he has noticed that a dark current is flowing in the middle of a veteran in the north. Obviously, the St. Hilda family has begun to act. Cybus knows that if he does not take measures, it will be too late. Angle Viscount, in fact, I really want to apologize to you this time. Apologize, Governor Guan, I don't remember you having offended me. I want to apologize to you for Weber. Weber, Khalil thought for a while and then reacted to Sybil saying his grandson. It was the last time Colin and Villa went to visit Cybus, and the act of provocation he met was slammed by Colin. Yes, Master Viscount, Weber's last behavior was really inappropriate, so I want to apologize to you sincerely. Colin rolled his eyes, secretly, sincere fart. Nothing that boy came, so sincere? You are so polite by the correspondence officer that time we just exchange martial arts, there is nothing wrong with the behavior of the Weber Cavaliers. You are so kind, Sabar's old face laughed into a chrysanthemum, which said kindly, now that Willa has been registered as the Duke of the North, even you have obtained the authority of the Northern Guardian's authority, it's really gratifying. I just don't know when you are going to return to the North. We are ready to leave tomorrow. So fast. Yeah, after all, the North is just stable, and there are still a lot of things that need to be dealt with. We have stayed in Yulongchinch for a long time this time, and we can't drag any more. Cybus quickly invited, tonight I will set off a banquet at the manor tonight, and I hope that you and the Duke of the Duke can come to participate. I don't have to send off the banquet I have arranged with Vera tonight. Colin waved his hand, and he rejected the good intentions of the other party. Sabar suffocated slightly, but then issued an invitation again, would you like it at noon today? Lunch, Colin glanced at each other with a smile. Do you have time to prepare in such a short time? As long as you and the Duke of the Duke are willing to come, I will let them arrange everything in the shortest time. Still, don't have trouble. Colin waved his hand and refused again. Seeing that Cybus seemed to be unwilling, Colin said the problem that the other party really cared about, you are looking for me today for the ruling election. Cybus froze, it seemed that Colin was so direct, but he quickly reacted and nodded again and again. Yes, presumably, you should have heard of the Prime Minister's proposal about the reform of the Senate. Hey, this is really noisy. The old guy from Heidegger didn't know what he was doing. In my opinion, this is simply the most important pillar that touches the political balance of the empire. If this proposal is passed, he will be completely nailed to the shame of history, and he will be cast aside. Colin looked at the impeccable Cybus, cursing the Prime Minister of the Empire, and lifted the coffee on the table quietly. When the other party finally calmed down, he said again, are you worried about the next party election? Can you be elected? Ahem, it's a little worried. Cybus's face was embarrassed. Actually, my opinion with Vera is to replace you. What? Cybus was scared by Colin's frankness, his mouth was boss, and he lived like a water-deficient fish. You, why do you? Colin glanced at the other party lightly, disdain in his heart, but comforted his mouth. We also think about it. After all, you have been a ruling official for so many years, and you must be very tired, so you can change it alone and help you share it. I'm not tired, Cybus was anxious. Master Viscount, after all, I have been a ruling officer for more than 40 years and have rich experience. I know how to win the biggest interest in the North in the Senate. You can, can't you? Really? Colin interrupted the opponent coldly, and his tone became uncertain. The last time I voted for Vera's inheritance, right, why did you express your opposition? Cybus sighed and sincerely said, Master Viscount, I admit that I have had some prejudices to the Duke before, but I have guaranteed you that since then, I must have changed it from any issue, on any question, I, 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 they will keep pace with the Duke. Why is there any prejudice? Because after all, the Duke was a mage. Excellent Cybus, Colin interrupted coldly. If you don't want to tell the truth, then we have no need to continue talking. The struggle appeared on the face of Cybus, but under Colin's indifferent gaze, he still told the truth. Master Viscount, the reason why I was so hostile to you before is because you reached a peace talk agreement with the giant demon empire. The peace talks agreement, Khalil was puzzled, thinking of not understanding why the agreement caused Sabar's hostility to himself. Cybus coughed twice, explaining, I have some personal relationships with the chairman of several chambers of commerce in the north, and they have some opinions on the tax exemption clauses in this agreement. Colin thought for a moment and finally understood where Cybus's hostility came from. He had a tax-free clause in the peace talk agreement signed by the giant demon empire. However, this duty-free place is not for all businessmen on the northern border, only the merchants in the viscounts of the Colin can enjoy taxes and fees when entering the giant demon empire demonstration of discounts. Obviously, this made other businessmen in the north jealous, and they then found the Cybazan. With the extravagant scenes that Collins had seen in the house of the ruling official, I am afraid that the funding of these northern businessmen's funding of Sabar's is definitely not a small number, and it is no wonder that Sabas has been targeting Vera and Corin. Moreover, Colin knew that he had done another thing, and it would definitely make major business clubs in the north hate him. In order to disrupt the north, Mr. Yan caused famine and let the Tulip Chamber of Commerce, controlled by the Uman family, lead to the accumulation of food. This move quickly responded to many businessmen on the northern border. In order to raise the price of food, these businessmen who are profitable are regardless of the death of the northern borders. Fortunately, the Colin bought a large amount of food from the semi-elf kingdom to ease the famine in the north. Fortune plan. Later, after Villa controlled the winter city of Winter, he began to force the price of food to suppress the prices of food and ordered the businessmen to open their positions and put food. This further intensified the contradiction with businessmen. Khalil did not take these merchants into his eyes. After all, this era is not better than its predecessor. The status of the businessman is not high, and it doesn't matter if he offends it. However, I did not expect that these businessmen would still find a way to exert their influence and add a lot of trouble to Vera. Kalinma was holding his chin and began to reflect, was he too good about these merchants before? At this time, he also realized that the key to the problem was actually not in Sabas, but in the merchant forces in the north. I didn't care about them before, and now it seems that the influence of these businessmen cannot be completely ignored. It seems that after going back this time, I have to rectify this group. Sabas looked at the silent Colin and was embarrassed. After a while, he tentatively said, Master Viscount, please rest assured, I will definitely draw the boundaries with these businessmen in the future. Colin came back and showed his smile again to Sybil, excellent for Sabar, you can change your mind, it is better. I believe that the Duke will also give you a chance to change from new. After all, how do you, it is also the veteran of the St. Hilda family. Sabas's eyes brightened, her face was red, and she quickly said, loyalty, thank you for your trust, please rest assured, and please also rest assured that the Duke of the Duke. Colin nodded and seemed to be satisfied with Sabar's statement, but said lightly, by the way, the Duke of the Duke will return to the north tomorrow, and it is not necessary to send off a banquet guard escorting the Duke. Of course, there is no problem, Cybus said immediately. My manor guard has more than 700 elite soldiers, which will be left to you. You won't leave a little, Don't be afraid of what thieves slipped in at home. I still have confidence in the guarding power of Yulongjinj. How can a thief dare to spread the wild here? That's good. Colin was polite and nodded, but then he seemed to inadvertently say, by the last time, the Weber knight who communicated with me last time, he should also be in the guards. Sibba suddenly stunned me, and then I realized that Colin's plan was to let his grandson go to Winter City as a hostage. For a moment, Sibba still nodded and said, of course, Weber has always admired your martial arts. If he can have a chance to follow you, he will not miss it. That's the best. Colin stood up with a smile and shook hands with Sabas cordially, saying, don't worry, I will take care of the Weber knight. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busrud. Chapter 321. Chapter 318. Early the next morning, outside the north gate of Yulong City. Come to the new Duke of the North and the Guardian of the Northern Lords. The crowds are quite large, and the specifications are quite high. Even the Emperor Ledhart and the Pope Gregory came. Vera was wearing a pale green long-distance suit today. The golden duke sleeves exuded their eye-catching glory in the sun. The tall posture showed a refreshing temperament, but the sweet smile on her face was still as gentle as before. Colin was wearing a set of silver armor. The surface of the armor was cold, mysterious, and cold, like a night from the ghost. The surface of the armor is covered with complicated Olympic rational patterns. At a glance, it is known that it is valuable enchanting armor. In fact, this set of armor was sent by the governor of Sybas last night as a farewell gift to Colin. Colin speculated that 80% of the expensive armor was sent by the golden owners behind Sybas. It is estimated that they realized the crisis and wanted to fix the relationship with Colin. For the goodwill of the merchants, Colin did not refuse, and today he also deliberately wore the set of armor to make the other party feel at ease. Of course, Colin will definitely not be bought by a set of armor. He is now the Guardian of the North, and it is not so cheap. This move is just to paralyze those businessmen. When they return to the North, Colin will definitely give these bastards who are profitable. Emperor Reinhardt stood at the forefront of the offline team, looking at the pair of people in front of him, and said with a smile, Vera, Colin, and the north of the Empire will be guarded by you. I hope you will not live up to my trust, let alone let the St. Hilda family's prestige. Yes, Majesty. Queen Madara held the hands of Prince Harrison and Princess Judy and went to the front. There are two little guys, I hope they will not add too much trouble to you. Of course not. Vera quickly took Harrison and Judy from the Queen. We will definitely take care of them. Queen Madila's eyes were full of reluctance, but he didn't say anything. Emperor Reinhardt explained expressionlessly, the young eagle always leaves the nest and goes to suffer from the baptism of wind and rain alone. The two of them seemed to be mothers, but Colin suddenly felt something was wrong. At this time, Pope Gregory stepped forward, first drew a holy cross in front of Vera, and then prayed warmly. The Duke, I hope my Lord's glory shines on your way forward. Vera quickly returned to the gift. Colin stared at the Pope's movement for fear that the other party would do something. Now he is quite alert to this bald old man. However, Colin feels good for the Pope, from the magic of the Pope to the magic of Verasta. The disadvantage, of course, was affected by Vera, who increasingly preferred the Church. However, this is not good. At present, Collins also sees that the royal book seals him as the Guardian of the North, just wanting to make him a pioneer in resisting the Church. But how could Colin be willing to become the royal pawn and fight for the interests of the royal family? Therefore, Vera, who has been performed by the magic, can become a wonderful excuse. Colin can also sway between the Church and the royal family, selling the price instead of becoming a chess piece of the royal family stupidly. At this time, the Pope also came to Colin and said with a smile, Angle line, I can feel the preference of the holy light for you. I believe that you will have some achievements on the night. Colin raised his eyebrows, but he remembered that in the Winter City, Agene, the Bishop of the North, also said to him. At that time, he thought that the other party was just complimenting himself, but now it seems that it is not. What is the connection between Mofe blood and the Lord of the Glorious? Or does he have such a reaction when he drinks too much water? Crown, this is my master's grace to me, Colin said, ha ha. The Pope, Gurui glanced at Colin with a deep meaning and then stopped saying more. Colin took Vera to say goodbye to the nobles who came off to see off, and then turned back to the carriage. Before getting on the carriage, Colin also glanced at the accompanying guards, and it turned out that the grandson of the Sybazan Weber Cavaliers. This guy seems to be afraid of being retaliated against by Colin and is trying to reduce his sense of presence. Colin smiled lightly, ignored the other party, helped Vera on the carriage, held Prince Harrison and Princess Judy again, and finally got in. In the gaze of the nobles of the emperors, the team of the Duke of the North walked north. At the end of summer, the scenery in the field was pleasant, and the sun was bright. Inside the carriage, Vera has already turned out a glory holy ceremony to look at it. Seeing this, Colin frowned secretly, and he couldn't figure out whether it was the Pope's magical skill or whether Wyra wanted to better understand the church after conversion. The two little guys in the royal family were sitting in a dangerous situation at first, but soon began to get impatient. Especially Princess Judy, her smart big eyes turned, and she suddenly said to Colin, "Teacher, can you tell me a story?" The royal princess is wearing a pink floral long skirt, and the pink faces are bright and beautiful, especially those sapphire-like eyes, which have a hint of enchanting temperament, perhaps inherited from the peerless Queen Mother. Of course, in the impression of Colin, this is a little gorgeous girl, but he clearly remembers the gorgeousness that the other party kept trying to step on his feet at the beginning of the ball. When promoting the narrow heart, Colin nodded. "Okay, then I will tell you a story." "Thank you, teacher," Princess Judy smiled sweetly. The restrained Prince Harrison was shocked to the side. He had a lesson in painful lessons. He knew that the teacher's story was not so nice. Maybe he would have to have a nightmare tonight. Thinking of this, he hurriedly said, "Sister Vera, teacher, I want to go out and breathe." "Go." Khalil smiled. Prince Harrison ran out immediately. Princess Judy looked at her brother's embarrassment and muttered in a low voice, "Desert." Colin glanced at the ancient princess, cleared his throat, and began to say. "It is said that in the depths of the vast sea, there is a mermaid kingdom. The king has 6 daughters, and the youngest daughter is the most beautiful, and the most beautiful one." "What is the mermaid, Naga?" Princess Judy couldn't help but interrupt. "It's almost the same, but it is more beautiful," Colin explained casually and continued, "When the mermaid princess was 15 years old, she floated on the sea to play and saw a handsome prince live. Crazy wind and rain destroyed the prince's ship." With the development of the story, even Vera, who did not care about it at first, put down the glorious holy ceremony in his hand, listening to the story of Colin. Princess Mermaid found the witch, drinking the elixir became a man, but she was also cursed. The mermaid princess became dumb every step, like she stepped on the tip of the knife, and if the prince did not marry the mermaid princess, then she will become a bubble in the sea. Vera and Judy were completely fascinated by the story of Colin at this time, and they couldn't help but start worrying about the mermaid princess. She found the prince and danced the most beautiful dance for him, but unfortunately the prince didn't know what kind of pain she endured, and she didn't know she saved herself. Princess Mermaid's sisters couldn't bear to see her death, so she went to ask the witch. The witch gave the mermaid princess a sharp knife. Only by killing the prince with this knife can the curse be unlocked. But Princess Mermaid did not kill the prince. He just kissed the prince's forehead and then jumped into the sea. Later, Princess Judy asked anxiously. Later, Khalil was quiet. Later, people could no longer find Princess Mermaid and only found white foam on the seaside. After talking about the daughter of the sea, Colin picked up the pot and moistened his throat. However, At this time, the atmosphere in the carriage was extremely dignified. The little girl was already touched by the tragedy of Princess Mermaid. She almost cried, and even Vera was red with her eyes, and she looked a little bad at Colin's eyes. It seems to blame him for telling such a beautiful story. Princess Mermaid, is it really dead? Princess Judy couldn't help asking timidly. Yes, she became a bubble in the sea. Colin gave a cruel answer with a calm face. Wow, Princess Judy couldn't hold it anymore, crying out loud. Wyra glared at Colin fiercely and quickly put the little girl in her arms in the past, comforting her softly. Colin touched the tip of his nose and seemed to feel that he had done something too much. So, he quickly took out some small cakes prepared by Queen Madara before leaving and sent them to Princess Judy to persuade, well, your favorite cake. Unfortunately, Judy ignored him but buried his head in Wyra's arms, twitching his shoulders, and looked particularly sad. Clinton was a little embarrassed. Fortunately, at this time, the team suddenly stopped. At the same time, the voice of Daobon came from outside the car, Master Duke, Master Onist, the Speaker of the Mage Parliament before, he wants to see you. Colin was amnesty and immediately got up to Vera, you are now converting to the Lord of Glorious, and you will always gossip with the mage, or let me see him. Vera nodded. Colin quickly got out of the carriage. Princess Judy raised her head from Wyra's arms, but her face was full of tears, and she looked distressed. Vera passed the small cake over and said, do you want to eat a little? Princess Judy took the small cake and stuffed it into her mouth, and the rosy cheeks suddenly bulged. The cake is sweet and delicious, but it was a favorite food in the past, and now it has some inexplicable bitterness. This chapter is finished. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 322. When Colin got off the carriage, he saw the tall and thin figure wearing a silver mage robe in front of the motorcade. In fact, if he hadn't run out just to find an excuse, Colin wouldn't have wanted to see the Speaker of the Mages' Council at all. In Colin's opinion, this old mage's political sensitivity was too low, and he could not see the situation clearly. I don't know if it's because I spent so much time on arcane research that I neglected other aspects. Good day, Viscount Angelet. Good day, Mr. Ernest. Colin greeted with a smile, but his eyes were looking around as if he were admiring the scenery in the fields. Ernest didn't pay attention to Colin's slightly rude behavior and asked, I wonder if you can let me see the Duke. I'm sorry, the Duke is in poor health. If you have anything, just tell me directly. I will convey it to you. Ernest sighed, seeming to understand Vera's attitude. After the other party converts to the Lord of Glory, I am afraid that he will become increasingly alienated from the Mage Council, and it will be impossible for him to obtain preferential treatment in the North through his status as a mage. However, for the sake of the future of the Council of Mages, Ernest still wanted to give it a try and said, Your Excellency, Viscount, I took the liberty to come here this time in the hope that the Duke would remember the past friendship and relax restrictions on mages. Let us be able to travel in the North as we did before. Colin had already heard about the restrictions on mages mentioned by Ernest. Of course, this was also the consequence of Mr. Jin's sacrifice to Fallen Eagle City. Since the casting conditions of the forbidden spell Eye of Judgment spread, the hostility of the entire Radiant Empire towards mages has immediately risen to a higher level. Every lord of the Empire has begun to worry about whether their territory will become the target of sacrifices by mages. As a result, all the major lords in the Empire tacitly issued a ban on mages, strictly prohibiting any mages from entering the cities under their rule. Of course, it is not difficult for mages to disguise themselves as ordinary people and sneak into imperial cities. After all, not every city's guards can accurately distinguish mages from the crowd. However, This still brought great trouble to the mages. This is about why the mages wanted to enter the cities of the glorious empire. It stands to reason that the Mage Council does not believe in the Lord of Radiance and is naturally an enemy of the Empire, but in fact, they cannot do without the Empire. To become a mage, you must have arcane talent, but this talent is extremely rare, with a probability of almost 1 in 1,000, or even 1 in 1,000. Therefore, it is difficult to find a mage apprentice, relying solely on the population of the city of Yeveli. It is estimated that the mages have long since cut off their inheritance. Therefore, although mages hate the glorious empire, they always have to come to the empire to find apprentices with arcane talents. If you want to know a child's arcane talent, you must cast a test spell. However, the arcane fluctuations produced by this test spell will reveal the location of the mages. This is why it doesn't work for mages to pretend to be ordinary people and sneak into the city. As long as they want to find talented apprentices, they must continue to cast test spells, which will then attract the city defense army. Under the current tense situation, every lord will be particularly sensitive to arcane fluctuations in his city. Once discovered, he will immediately dispatch elite troops to search and arrest. After catching the mages who have sneaked in, he will hang them without hesitation. That's why Ernest panicked. Sorry, Lord Ernest, I cannot agree to your request. As for the reason, I believe you should also know. Vera will also not put her people in danger. Colin did not hesitate. He rejected the other party's request. The mage's life and death had nothing to do with him. Ernest said again in an urgent tone, Viscount Angeli, the Council of Mages has listed the Blade of Judgment as a forbidden technique. Please believe that we have absolutely no idea of sacrificing innocent people. If you are still not at ease, I can limit the level of mages entering the north to below level 3, and they will have absolutely no ability to release forbidden spells. Moreover, once they do anything inappropriate, the city defense army can easily catch them. Colin shrugged. He shrugged, still shaking his head, and said, Sorry, this will still arouse the resentment of the northern lords. Ernest heard that Colin's tone was slightly relaxed, and he felt excited, and quickly threw out a bait. Your Excellency, Viscount, do you want to know which high-level mage cast a spell to blow up the cliff in Shadow Canyon and block the Black Cavalry's retreat in the canyon? Colin's face changed, and he finally became interested. To be honest, if Ernest still thought that the old relationship between Vera and the mage alone could open the door to the mage in the north, that would be too naive. But fortunately, the other party finally woke up and understood that only by giving the North what it wants can there be room for negotiation. Tell me his name and relevant evidence proving that this person is involved in the conspiracy against the Black Cavalry. After I confirm it, I can agree to allow mages below level 3 to freely enter and leave the North. Ernest's face showed. Finally, he smiled, his frown relaxed, and he was not worried at all whether Colin would break his promise. He immediately said, Sir Viscount, this person is the Duke's teacher, Master Cusius. Cusius, Hughes. Colin raised his eyebrows, a little surprised by this answer. But then he felt that it was really possible. After all, when Mr. Jin was offering sacrifices to Fallen Eagle City, he had arranged for Master Cusius to guard outside the city to prevent any disturbance. Therefore, these two people had long colluded together. When Mr. Jin was plotting against the Black Cavalry, it was indeed reasonable for him to arrange for Master Cusius to go to Shadow Canyon to cooperate with the Eastern Territory. Yes, it's Cusius. Your Excellency, Viscount, if you don't believe it, you can send someone to the east to investigate. It was the Pegasus Legion that set up an ambush in the Shadow Canyon, although most of them have died in the Black Cavalry army. However, there is also a group of wounded soldiers who have returned to Belu City long ago. These people have all seen Cusius. It is not difficult for you to verify. Cusius, haha, Colin sneered. Thinking of this mage who actively approached and wanted to become the arcane consultant of the Saint Hilda family, if he knew that the Marquis of Garcia who participated in the frame-up was Vera's biological father, I am afraid he would regret it very much. Colin didn't have a good impression of this guy originally, but now that he has such a reason, of course, he won't be merciful to him. Thank you for the information, Mr. Ernest. I will discuss with Vera allowing some mages to enter the north to find apprentices. Of course, in order not to arouse the fear of the northern lords, the way and method you choose to inherit is also important. Changes must be made. I hope you can understand this. I will contact you after Vera and I have discussed a feasible plan. Ernest was overjoyed when he heard this and quickly thanked him. After the speaker of the Mage Council left, Colin stood there but fell into deep thought. He suddenly felt that Jewel might be someone he could cooperate with. First of all, mages are natural enemies of the church, and enemies of enemies can also become friends. In the same way, Yevil is also a major concern for the Eastern Territory. On this issue, their position is once again the same as that of the Northern Territory. Coupled with the fact that Colin already believed that he had the key to the Master Council, the search for the successor, it would be a matter of course to draw the Masters over. As for the issue of faith, which the Imperial nobles are generally afraid of, it is not a problem at all for Colin. He himself does not have much respect for the Lord of Glory and even uses the other party's name to develop blood descendants. Of course, he does not, and I'd like to cooperate with those faithless mages. As for whether this move would arouse opposition from the Northern Lords, Colin actually didn't care too much. On the contrary, he really wanted to see if Vera proposed to lift the ban on the passage of some mages, how many Northern Lords would oppose it, and how many would defy it. Colin can also take this opportunity to clean up the interior of the Northern Territory. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 323. Father. We must find a place to take shelter from the rain. Hans wiped the rain off his face and shouted distractedly. However, the tall and thin figure in front of him didn't even look back. Father. How about we find a higher place, tie the two horses together, hide under the horses' bellies, and wait until the rain stops before leaving. Sonny finally looked back at his embarrassed son, filled with hatred. Gangdi yelled, "Shut up, as a knight of the Grantu family, can't you bear being exposed to a little rain?" Seeing that his father was angry, Hans didn't dare to yell anymore, but his face still remained. He was angry and muttered in a low voice, "It's not a knight, it's a knight's apprentice." The two of them walked hard for a while in the pouring rain. Hans suddenly shouted excitedly, "Fire, father, there is a fire ahead." Sonny looked in the direction Hans was pointing, but his brows furrowed slightly, and he asked doubtfully, "I haven't arrived at Dongquan town yet, could it be a traveler passing by?" "No matter what it is, the presence of fire means there is a shelter from the rain there, let's go and hide." Hans gently pinched the horse's belly and sped up a little, and Sonny temporarily put aside his doubts and accelerated forward. After walking for about 3/4 of an hour, the two finally reached the top of a small hill, which was a large-scale camp. Sonny looked at the obviously well-trained guards and tall horses in the camp and was shocked. He knew that this must be a noble caravan, and a big noble at that. The patrolling guards immediately stepped forward to question them after seeing the two men. "Dear knight, I am Bachelor Sonny from the Grantu family. This is my son Hans. We are passing by here. I wonder if you can let us borrow your camp to escape this damn rainstorm." "Grantu, the Lord family of Winter Springtown." "Yes. Please wait a moment." The knight returned to the camp, probably to ask for instructions. He returned not long after, nodded to the embarrassed two people, and said, "Come in. Thank you very much for your generosity." Sonny and his son led the horse into the camp and were taken into a large tent by the knight, where 7 or 8 guards had gathered. "Give these two guests of the Grantu family a blanket each," Let them warm themselves by the fire, and drink some hot soup, said the knight who brought them in order. Hans quickly thanked him. Sonny used the firelight in the tent to clearly see the armor on the knight and the golden lion badge on his chest. He was shocked and blurted out, "Is this the Duke of the North's car?" The knight nodded head, "Yes, the Duke will also pass through Winter Springs on this trip, so he can take you two with him." "Thank you so much," Sonny thanked him quickly, but there was a doubt in his heart. He knew that Duke St. Hilda had just accepted the news of the Emperor's canonization, so the convoy should be returning to the north. However, the problem was that returning to Winter City from Yulong City would not pass through Winter Springtown. Of course, Sonny would not take the liberty to ask about the doubts in his heart. He just smiled and said, "I wonder if I can have the honor to meet the Duke and thank her personally." "It's too late today, I'll ask you tomorrow." "Okay, thank you very much." Watching the knight stride away, Sonny drank the hot soup handed to him by his son and fell into deep thought. Early the next morning, the heavy rain had stopped, and the soldiers in the camp lit up bonfires and began to prepare breakfast. 3 large pots were boiling with steam, and several plump yellow sheep were tumbling on the barbecue grill. The golden fat dripped into the bonfire, bursting out sparks. The alluring aroma made both Grantu and his son unable to help but swallowed. After the game was roasted, the waiter unhooked the yellow sheep from the grill and skillfully used a knife to divide the crispy on the outside and tender on the inside mutton into 2 exquisite silver plates. 2 young and beautiful maids held up the silver plates and presented them to the most luxurious tent in the center of the camp. Hans stared closely at the maid's perky butt, while Sonny stared at the tent in the center of the camp. After breakfast, Sonny and Hans put on clean clothes. After confirming that there was no omission or rudeness, they patiently waited for the Duke's summons. Not long after, the knight who had brought them into the camp last night came over and led the 2 of them to the tent in the center of the camp. Under Hans's curious and eager eyes, the curtain of the tent was opened by 2 maids, and a delicate leather boot stepped out first, and then a slim figure came into Hans' eyes. When he put it on the door curtain, Hans finally saw the face of the owner of the delicate hand. Then, the 16-year-old boy froze. Her golden hair is tied into an elegant lady's bun. Her blue eyes are deeper than sapphires. Under her beautiful jade nose are flaming red lips. There is a faint smile on her fair face, and her eyes are flowing. In the meantime, Hans's mind went blank. He had long heard that the Duke of the North was a stunning beauty, but the appearance he had fantasized about countless times was not as good as the smile in person. Hans stared blankly at Vera as she walked out of the tent. He just wanted to kneel in front of her, kiss her toes, and praise her with the most beautiful poems. It's a pity that this beauty didn't notice the goose-like young boy from the Grantu family at all. Moreover, her left hand was holding a heroic young man behind her. Hans's heart was immediately consumed by raging jealousy. Of course he knew that this handsome young man should be the husband of the Duke of the North, Viscount Angelet, but Hans still couldn't help but think about this goddess-like figure. Why is it not me who is holding the hand? When Sonny looked at his son who was standing still with glazed eyes, he knew that his old habit had happened again, so he quickly stepped forward to block his son's rude gaze, bowed, and said, "Dear Saint Hilda, Duke, respected Viscount Angelet, thank you for your helping hand last night. Your kindness is as dazzling as the brilliance of the sun." Colin looked at the 2 people in front of him with interest, especially the one who claimed to be a bachelor. Middle-aged man, Sonny Grantu. In fact, the Grantu family is not a prominent family. The family title is only a baron, and the fiefdom is only an inconspicuous town in the Scarlet Flame territory, Winter Springtown. If it weren't for the Prime Minister, Baron Heidegger, who mysteriously asked Colin to go to Winter Springtown when he was in Yulong City, and said there would be unexpected gains here, Colin wouldn't have taken a detour to such a small place. Along the way, Colin had been speculating about what there was in Winter Springtown that deserved the attention of the Prime Minister of the Empire. Now that he happened to meet Bachelor Sonny, who was taking shelter from the rain, Colin suddenly had a clue. Bachelor is a title suffix that only graduates of White Tower College can have. It may not be as noble as a noble title, but in Colin's heart, it actually carries more weight. Sister Sonny, there is no need to be polite. In fact, we are also going to Winter Springtown to visit Baron Grantu, and we hope you can help introduce him. Colin smiled and greeted Bachelor Sonny, looking out of the corner of his eye. I saw two small figures running towards the side quickly. Good morning, Sister Vera. Good morning, teacher. Prince Harrison and Princess Judy first saluted and greeted, and then looked at Sonny and his son curiously, as if they felt that the guests in this camp looked familiar. Unexpectedly, Bachelor Sonny actually took the initiative to salute and greet the two little guys, His Royal Highness Prince Harrison, His Royal Highness Princess Judy. Colin raised his eyebrows and was surprised that he did not shout out to Harrison and Judy his true identity, and he also believed that the guards in the camp would not reveal this kind of information to two strangers. Unless, this Bachelor Sonny already knows Harrison and Judy. Prince Harrison nodded in return, his little face full of doubts, and asked, "Who are you?" Bachelor Sonny smiled slightly, with a hint of sadness in his eyes, and said calmly, "Your Highness, I am Sonny Grantu. Maybe you don't remember, but 5 years ago, I was the Minister of Agriculture of the Empire.